Well, as I say often, BDSM dominance is within BDSM relationships, and I coach people to be basically more dominant and help them with that. I am also helping them people to remind that it's within a BDSM relationship, and that of course underneath we're all equal. It's like a cake model. You can't add topping on just a plate. You have to have a cake underneath, a cake of equalness. Um, there's always a risk in dominance, and the risk in dominance is that yeah, well, basically power corrupts, and if you start to believe your own power 100%, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Another favorite quote of mine to my subbies is, "Yep, life's not fair, but the difference is it gives you a hard on." So, um, can you? Yep. Um, I always try to find out with people what the fuck is dominance, and if you look at dominance, and you look at actually dog's brain, uh, you can basically have a feeling for what dominance is in our behavior. Uh, and if you remind that actually our emotional brain is lots, it resembles a dog's brain, it's a good thing to remember this quote, because a lot of people tend to think that aggression and fear is the same as respect and dominance, which is, I don't think it is. And if you look at dogs and you see this uh, tile where basically dominance and submission and aggression and fear are envisioned, are drawn, you see that it's not the same. It's linked, but it's not the same. And that's why I often say that if you want to really have a look at being a good dominant, well, have a look at Cesar Milan and the dog whisperer, and have a look at how he is really attentive and really alert, but really assertive, but at the same time quite calm. We don't have to shout too much to be dominant. Um, if you investigate something, it's also interesting to sometimes investigate the opposite. And the opposite, as far as I'm concerned, of being dominant, in my eyes, is basically the neediness. And if you remember that if you're needy, you can be dominant. Uh, and if you have a look at your own position, um, be careful that the neediness, for instance, your neediness for sex, sometimes could really, yeah, undermine your own dominance. Um, Another thing that people often think is that you shouldn't be doubting anything as a dominant, especially not yourself. You should not doubt yourself as a dominant. And I always think that the ability to doubt is what makes that I'm not just a harmful narcissist. And I often help people basically to doubt as a dominant, because there's dominant ways of doubting, and you can just, for instance, you can just ask whatever what you want to know, so you don't need to doubt, or you can be unsure of things and then bear your own unsureness, endure your doubt. Um, Another thing is that BDSM is kind of a different thing. It's different, has all kind of axes, and often people have to find their own axes and have to their own kicks in this thing. And for me, fetish, I put it under bondage, because bondage is not only the forced submission, but also the fun of looking bound and being more or less bound in this way, without, and that can be with chains or with clothes or whatever. So I pull fetish under bondage. And also sex and spiritual could be under the S, because for some people it's sex and for some people it's not. And for some people it's a really spiritual thing. And for some people it's really not. Um, and also this thing, and that's important, where we often forget that being in a dominant submission role is something different. Um, you can have yourself being pulled up, and people can carry you as the dominant, and the submissive can carry you as the dominant. But you can also put somebody down, and especially in putting somebody down, you often see that people are making remarks like, "You're not doing it right. You're not doing it good," and that's okay in dominant submission. If you're both into that, great. But often people forget that the people into discipline do like, well, actually, that their behavior is done well, and they do like it when they do something good, and or when they clean your boots, and it's done well. They like to you to see that, and to give a remark about that, and they like you to enjoy it. And sometimes you see people that where the one partner is into discipline and the other partner is into dominant submission, and this really gets array because people don't understand that they're working on different lines, working on different axes. What I often talk about is relational consent, and relational consent is a thing. Um, uh, I want things, you want things. We both want the same thing, I hope. And it's basically these these make four angles. This makes Betty Martin's wheel of consent makes four angles where you're all have these different angles where you can be um, yeah, you can work with. Um, Basically, this is a whole workshop in 5 minutes, which doesn't do it right, but uh, often as a dominant you have to learn to wish out loud what you want. If I'm taking your throat and I would like to test your gag reflex, then I should be outspoken about that, and that is sometimes a thing that people have to learn. um, if you're you're submissive and we cannot quite see it, and I cannot really do anything because um, when you're submissive, really you have to really want this. You have to really submit to what you want to give. When you allow something, it's good to ask for boundaries as a dominant, and have clarity about the dominant, about the boundaries of the person that allows you to do things to them. And if they're accepting, you should also be able to accept the service, and the service somebody gives you. And like the if somebody grants you this, then you should be able to accept it. Another thing I often say is you make a time warp in relational consent. You make a jump to the future where you look back on things. If you are busy doing terrible things to somebody and you make this jump to the future and you look back on it, how would you tomorrow look back upon today? Because we're still in a relationship tomorrow, and it's good that we're both in this relationship. So there's this time thing. And if I look back on it tomorrow in a good way, then I'm more aware of what I'm doing now. Um, Consent is also something that is, yeah, basically it's a dance, and it's verbal and non-verbal. And we both want to we want to look good on it, and what's important, what people often forget, is that consent is basically being burned up by either being boring or crossing boundaries. If you do the same all the time, people lose their possibility to give you consent. And if you're crossing boundaries, they're also thinking, well, I'm not consenting anymore. So if you don't look at consent as a fixed thing, but as a dance between two people, and you can invite it, you can seduct it, and that doesn't mean that you can force it or coerce it, but you can invite it. That helps to make it a better dance for both. And that's where you, as a dominant, have the initiative to take somebody with you and to lead this dance. Um, Basically, I think that in the dominant has a personal playing field, and there's a thing that my crotch wants to do now. I find it hot. I find it nice. I want to do things with you. There's ethics. I don't want to have done certain things tomorrow. And there's techniques. And if I want to expand my triangle, if I want to have more fun, then I should allow myself more to really want what I want, to express my lust. I should be able to communicate better with you the ethics, and so I can dare to go further, and I can better my techniques and my materials so that I can go deeper. And um, if that's no. So another thing is basically the how do you do it? How are you just like a good dominance? And just be yourself is often said, and I think that's kind of. I think if you try to do a better version of yourself, that's way better than just doing being yourself. And I'd like people to put a little power and put a little extra energy as it when you're a dominant. Um, Another thing that people often forget is that there's a discrepancy between the subs time and the doms time, and where subs time seems to melt down and the doms time seems to speed up. We sometimes don't know how long something has been, and we can, if we understand this, then we understand better what the experience of the other one is, where we can better play the other one. So I help people with what kind of dominance do you want, what's the way of your looks, you're playing with space. uh, as a dominant, you can be like a gentleman, or you can be like a trainer, or you can be like a leather guy or rubber guy. It can be fetish, can be all kinds of things. Um, you can be a dominant that likes to script things, and that helps because you can plan, and especially in the beginning of your dominance, that can be really nice. But you can be a flux guy, where you do whatever the fuck you like, and well, basically unexpected actions lead to this fun loss of control. Uh, you can understand there's different styles also in whatever fetish you have. I can be like the god type, and I presume you are helping me. Or I can be stern, I can be directing. I should then look to a sub that understands this. If I'm a god, I'm not taking that much of an initiative. It's basically the sub who serves me. If I'm stern, then I'm more the guy that says, now I see everything. Now you're going to do this. If I'm directing, same thing. And if I'm technical, it's you have to have somebody who likes to be settling, who likes to be passive. Also, a thing that often meet is that lust is kind of vulnerable, and it's kind of vulnerable to say what makes you horny and what's really your fun. And you better think about this vulnerability and choose it, because that actually makes you more dominant. The awkwardness of asking for something that is really horny for you, yeah, well, that's basically awkwardness is your best friend. It shows the direction you could go to. You could learn to play with space. I often help people to understand how you can play with space and room, and the way you look and the way you take your behavior. Also, uh, making space because something is hanging there. Show your relaxation. Show your what you want to do. Learn to play with eyes. Women have often more possibilities with this, but it's good to have also to take a look in the mirror and as a dominant, like, have these different looks and dare to want something and dare to ah. If you know how you look in the mirror, it helps you to really get to what you really want. Search for male examples. In touch, don't be just hard, but also try to give giving touch and taking touches. And that's also like, the palm of your hand is more the giving touch, and taking is more with your fingertips. Dare to grab. And remember, everything's yours. Of course, if you've taken somebody's honor, you need to do a bit of aftercare. And in punishment or punishment, um, I often help people to remind, well, if I really start to punish people, and it's not clear that it's for fun, sometimes, especially if you're not just having a BDSM relation, but you're also in a other living together love relation, and you can punish people, that sometimes changes really the relationship underneath. Sometimes it eats away a bit of equalness if you're not careful with that. So, um, that's what I wanted to tell for today. Whatever gets you through the night.